Hi, Max.
Yeah, hi, Jill. So, hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to another episode of the Accessibility Advantage, where I am not only continuing to advocate for more accessibility for and inclusion of people with disabilities by emphasizing the many positive benefits, I'm also continuing to just navigate StreamYard the best way I can. So, no singing today, y'all, but you do have me and Jill. I am Maxwell Ivy, known as the Blind Blogger. I am a 59-year-old Caucasian male with medium length brown curly hair that has some gray and some white in it. It's longer today and grayer today than I would like it, but that's life. I'm wearing a button down burgundy shirt and I'm recording this from my bedroom, which is also my office. I have retinitis pigmentosa and Bardet-Biedl syndrome. I have only light perception, which means no functional vision. My pronouns are he and him. And you can find me at the accessibilityadvantage.com. If you do want to reach out to me concerning hiring me to improve the accessibility at your organization's online platforms, then please do visit the website and use the link to book a conversation. Who knows, you might end up on the podcast too. So today, I'm very lucky to be joined by Jill Heinze. She is an AI trust architect and the founder of Saddle Stitch Consulting, where she helps organizations leverage technology's potential through using ethical methods. With over 20 years of experience, she specializes in developing in using user needs to develop products that solve problems for real people in the real world. And one of her goals is to create a responsible AI strategies that go beyond compliance to reach genuine trustworthiness and positive outcomes for everyone. You can find her at saddlestitchconsulting.com. So, Jill, thank you so much for coming on the podcast.
Max, thank you so much for having me, and thanks for that great introduction. I appreciate it.
Well, I'm glad you like it, and I look forward to us having a great conversation. And first, I'd love for you to share some of your journey before getting involved in the tech and the AI stuff, because I feel like the years you spent in education and in library service really prepared you to be a great advocate for what you're doing now.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, my path career-wise has been a little bit of a winding journey. So I'm good case study of like, there's no preset path. You just follow what you're passionate about. But yeah, I can start with how I began my career. I was a history major coming out of undergraduate school, thinking, I really wanted people to be able to access their history. I was going to be an archivist. I really loved helping people find stuff, basically, and ended up becoming a reference librarian at Virginia Commonwealth University in Richmond, Virginia. That was my first professional job. I was an undergraduate services coordinator, but part of my remit in that role, which I think pertains to kind of what we're talking about today, was to manage our assistive technologies. At that time, Max, you and I have talked, we've had some real, I don't know how user-friendly, like the JAWS reader, the Kurzweils, and that kind of thing, were for our folks. But that was part of my remit and really exposed me to, really thinking about how people engage with hardware and information, and getting a firsthand look at some of those challenges there. So once I left VCU, I worked in the private sector doing research for a time, but ended up back at the University of Virginia as the director of user experience. And what was really cool about that role, and it sparked my whole journey more specifically into tech, was that I managed an entire web team. So I had developers, I had designers, I had UX researchers, content strategists, and we were in charge of the library's website, as well as some other kind of like discovery interfaces. And I was the liaison to our academic accessibility coordinator under the provost office. So in that role, I really represented the library in how we could bring our digital landscape really into compliance, but also like we were excited to be able to make things more accessible for our folks. So I know we talked about compliance isn't like necessarily fun, but we really, we're mission oriented people, and we want to do the right thing. And so yeah, we did a lot of work remediating our website, and it was really eye opening the extent to which technology can be a huge boon for accessibility, but then also what remains undone if you don't actually talk to people who are using the technologies, have needs that we don't necessarily plan for, and really widens your awareness of just how we can effectively serve people. So those were a couple really formative, journey points along my career that had me dealing directly with digital accessibility, and my career's generally been focused on user research and involving people in the technologies that they use. Yeah, that's just a little bit about where I come from on this topic.
Right, and I think that's a good place to start, because people assume because my thing is about the accessibility advantage and benefits that I'm anti-compliance, but in a lot of cases, compliance is fine if that's what gets people started. But if they stay at simply compliance, then they're really not going to serve their public, because, as I believe you've learned and you advocate for, we have to listen to our users, all of our users, if we're going to create not only accessible but enjoyable and fully usable products for people.
Yeah, absolutely. It might be the motivator to kind of kick off this awareness, but it's not the end goal. I mean, I think the spirit of what we're trying to do and the values that we bring to our work are really, really important. It's true of accessibility. It's true of responsible technology in general, because as we're seeing with AI, which I know we'll get into, regulations don't, for the most part, exist in the U.S. I mean, yes, we have state laws and we have some kind of light federal guidance, but it's not sufficient to really create places that are truly safe, accessible, and so on. So we need to use our judgment and our values.
Right. And in fact, most of the regulations we have in the United States were basically like, what is the least we can require of people so that we can say that we've passed a law without creating real hardships for businesses and other organizations? So you're absolutely correct there. I know a lot of people in the disability community are hopeful that new laws in other countries will force the internet to become more accessible, because obviously the internet is a global marketplace.
Mm-hmm.
But, even then, it's still a matter of people have to value their end users, don't they?
They do. I mean, that's just, I can't convince people who don't kind of come from that default view otherwise, but it is, I know most people, when you ask them, that they do care, but I think often we don't, know how to connect that care and concern and value system to like how we operationalize it in practice. And what does that mean? We have to do, what are our accountabilities? And that's one area that I strive to help people with.
Right. So since we're going to talk about an ethical approach to AI, why don't you tell my audience a little bit about what is the current state of AI, and what are the results of how it's operating now, both positive and negative?
Yeah, what a big question, Max. Geez,
I'm
the current
sorry.
state.
I'm sorry.
No, it's a good one. It's a good one. It's
Okay.
just hard to characterize succinctly. So you'll have to bear with me if I go on a tangent. But
Well, we are in favor of tangents on my
I love it.
podcast. We're in favor of storytelling. I often will tell my guests that I have no problem with the guest answering a better question than I asked. So
Awesome.
feel
Well,
free.
this is great for me then. Yeah. So I mean, I would characterize the current state of AI, and it's easy to forget if you are one of probably a minority of people who really follow this closely, because it feels like since ChatGPT kind of came out a few years ago, generative AI has really been, a focal point, and it almost seems like forever ago. But we are really in the very early stages of figuring out what generative AI, how it works, how it can be applied to use cases, how we can do it without introducing more vulnerabilities. One of the characteristics of generative AI is that, as the name implies, it generates outputs that we don't necessarily prescribe. So I might prompt or instruct a chatbot to write an email for me, but I don't know ahead of time exactly what that email is going to say. I might give it some parameters about length and tone and all of that, but we don't know the outcome. So you're talking about putting a technology that's fairly new with non-deterministic outputs into existing workflows and systems in production environments. And so I would characterize where we are as like pretty early days. I've heard AI researchers saying we're at the crawl stages. We're not even at the walk stages yet with this tech. So in light of that, what I am finding is that we are perhaps not anticipating what could go wrong in real concrete ways that enable us to prevent harms from happening. We know that if you look at social media as an example, or other platforms that rely on algorithms, because AI has been around for a while in different forms, we know it does harm. Like there's a whole database, the AI harms database. You can see how bias has, perpetuated certain inequalities, or false media has been perpetuated. So these aren't new problems. You don't have to be super creative to find historically where they've come from, but in our new environment, being able to produce content at speed and scale and really integrate it closely into our existing systems, it does pose, I think, a significant risk if you are doing so uninformed. And so I try to help inform people, and then we can kind of troubleshoot or ideate how do we apply this more responsibly.
Right. At least for now, when people ask me about AI and accessibility, I will tell them that a lot of the AI products are not as accessible as I would like them to be. But the more important issue is a lot of these AI models are creating inaccessible content at scale.
I was surprised to have you say that in a previous conversation before we spoke today. In one sense, because I think generative AI is perfectly capable of making huge strides in favor of remediating a lot of bad, inaccessible tech. I just think we know the common pitfalls and patterns and code, and I think we could, these tools could really build in a lot of safeguards. But what you're experiencing, and I can also share my experience with vibe coding, we're not there yet. So it was interesting to hear you confirm that.
Right. Well, what I mean is that you mentioned before, it comes down to people's desires and what they're willing to place the importance or the value on. And at least from what I'm seeing as far as the results right now is there may be I agree that that the AI products can help people improve accessibility. I'm just not seeing it being used for that yet.
Yeah. Sorry, go ahead.
And I see a lot of business owners who aren't even aware and have not put systems in place to try to understand what the results from the generative AI are, as far as whether they are accessible or inaccessible or somewhere in between.
It's really interesting. Yeah. I think good point about the outputs and thinking about like what it means from an accessibility standpoint. I even think about it as well from a pure, is this accurate standpoint? I don't even know if people are fully doing the due diligence in all cases around there's news reports of lawyers, presenting evidence in court that was hallucinated, if you will, or it's confabulation in AI terms. So, even just fact checking is one step we need to be integrating into how we use AI. And then you layer on accessibility, which people were not, frankly, doing very consistently before. So yeah, it's a challenge.
Well, then let me qualify and make you feel a little better that at least at this point in time, I am finding AI is not being used to create accessibility at scale. I feel like it could be.
Mm.
And I'm finding lots of little examples where AI is making my life easier online, but I'm not finding the big examples yet. And of course, that goes back to what you said about AI being basically in the stage of a crawling infant that hasn't even started toddling yet.
Yeah, I think that's it. I think you're seeing the things at scale, or applying AI, I should say, generative AI at scale in enterprise scenarios. I mean, I think collectively as a whole, the industry isn't there yet. So that does give me some optimism that people are kind of working through these problems, maybe in smaller implementations, and we could see that roll up. I do hope.
Right. So we've talked a little bit about how AI is now, what it's being used for, and its potential, which is a good segue for you because I'd like to hear more about how you work to create these more ethical AI solutions for the people that you work with.
Yeah, so a piece of my career journey that I left off. So we talked a lot about the library origins, which is really how I got very interested in tech and in leading teams to create human-centered, basically software. That prompted me to join a digital agency where I was the director of research. And later in my tenure there, I also became a lead on the data and AI side of the house. And basically what I've done my entire career is I've done research. The last 10 years, I've done a lot of user research, which involves inviting the people who are using the technology or have a stake in the technology into the conversation about how we build, design, and develop those, be it websites or apps or what have you, in the early phases and throughout the delivery. So the idea being, if we are aware of user needs, if we're aware of where the pitfalls are in the things that we are designing, we can remediate those before they get out into the wild and create more frustration or harm. And obviously, you don't always catch everything. It's an iterative process, but the idea is we catch the big stuff because we are involving and understanding our user groups. So as a researcher, my job has been to design studies and sample folks to properly to invite them in to give structured feedback in a reliable way, hopefully an unbiased way, so we get good quality information to make these decisions on. I have applied basically that same user research mentality when it comes to generative AI, proofs of concepts, and other technologies I've been involved in with the data scientists and AI engineers in building to create anticipatory design sessions. These are where we get our teams together. We look, and I know this is a lot, we can break it down, but basically we look at standards in AI and we argue.
Just go ahead and get through it, and then you can help us better understand it. So
yeah. So what I was going to conclude with was simply saying, yes, I work with those teams to ideate around the best practices. We use the NIST AI risk management framework as a really important touchstone in the work that we do. And then we ideate what could go wrong for our different user groups according to where we should be. And then we ideate around the mitigations. How are we going to solve these things? What are we going to build into our architecture? How is our UI going to handle these cases? And we do that in a proactive way. So it's applying user research, but also some of these emerging standards in AI risk management, and working directly with teams who are implementing it in order to produce things that are hopefully usable, pleasant, as you say, to use, and so forth.
Okay, so part of the process here is obviously to involve the people who will use a product, including people of all abilities. Am I at the right starting point at least?
You are at the right starting point. Yeah, there's a lot of nuances to that question of who and how and all of that. But yes, I think directionally that's right.
Right. And do you find it challenging to include people with the challenges of disabilities, whether they identify or not, or do you find it more difficult to get your clients to want to include that information in your research?
Yeah, I think it's a little bit of a mix. I think that I will go back to my work in education. where, recruitment is always a little bit of an issue. Like, we recognize we need humans to evaluate, this work. But, at certain times when I was at the university, we might have one blind student who, identified herself as such. So we couldn't rely on her to review every single, that's like an undue burden. She's not being paid, that kind of thing. And then, do we have the right representative users who are also using maybe assistive technologies, and can we identify them in a way that is respectful, I suppose is the way to put it. So we're not just saying, hey, do you have a cognitive disability that you want to talk to us, so there were just considerations around that. But those are solvable. We partner with organizations who work with folks with accessibility. Sometimes we have proxies. But I think your larger question is, are people like inviting of that perspective? And I would say oftentimes, outside of education, which is a little more like regulated in that way, I don't see people like seeking it out. That is something where I think if you are a professional designer, technologist, those are things we need to assert as important and educate our clients about oftentimes.
Yeah, that fits with what I pretty much expected, that both would be challenging in different ways. So that's the user aspect of it. Then I think as I understand it, the next part is creating a process for this research that is usable by everyone that you're potentially wanting to involve in a study.
Yeah, that's right.
And
Did you have sorry, I talked over you again.
No, it's all right. It's my mistake. And that I imagine gets into where you have to deal with user experience and accessibility challenges of whatever platform you're using.
That's right. So there's additional considerations, and I've had wonderful colleagues in the higher education space who have such great guidance on this. And things have changed over COVID. We do a lot more virtual studies, but certainly when we are designing the studies themselves, we are thinking, if they're in person, we are thinking logistically, how do we help navigate folks, make sure that they have the proper assistance to be able to participate in the studies. That includes, I've run focus groups with people who can do sign language interpretation and so forth. So we need to make sure we are building in the accommodations needed for everyone to participate fully in those sessions. And that does apply as well to the virtual. And you and I talked about one really, I think, simple way, but you're seeing that this is maybe not a practice people are using as much anymore, which is simply asking what kinds of do you have any needs that we should be mindful of so that you can participate fully, like when we are recruiting or sending out like even meeting invitations and so forth, to make sure we're proactive on that front as well.
Right. Quite often, the best place to start is a well-crafted question, and open-ended questions are great for that. And of course, it helps if you are an organization like yourself that has built up trust to the point where people feel comfortable answering those types of questions.
Exactly. Yeah. And I love your point about trust and building it up. I think that's why I've called myself a AI trust architect or strategist because it is so fundamental to being able to do good work in any space. And I think if we are not careful with how we develop and design AI systems or any other systems, eroding that trust, it's so hard to win back, but it is so essential for being able to do good work.
And I think you're definitely on the right track there. And sadly, I feel like if you asked most people in the world right now, the amount of trust around AI would be very low.
Yeah. I've seen varying statistics, and it's kind of a double-edged sword. Like, maybe on the one hand, I've seen studies that are a little bit skeptical about particularly like big tech or the big foundation, model builders, the open AIs, if you will, and their intention. But when it comes to maybe engaging with a Chat GPT or a Claude or something like that, there's also the problem of being overly trusting of these services. So some folks building maybe relationships that are unhealthily intimate, or as we talked about, maybe not being critical of the outputs of them to the extent that they should be. So it's a little bit of a two-sided coin.
Well, it kind of makes sense that there would be less trust of big tech in this area because they don't have such a great track record in the area of trust in general, and maybe more trust of smaller, more sauce level developers, the kind of people that you can connect with the person maybe more so than you connect with the product as you start to use it.
It's possibly true. I think also a lot of the chat bots, that as I used in the example, are sort of designed to be personable. They, you can tell it what tone you want. They can be very encouraging, for better or worse, a little bit personified. And so that's also part of the equation, I think, in trust too. But then that can erode very quickly when you get obviously erroneous outputs, or maybe something that's uncannily personable, like that uncanny valley that maybe you've heard reference, where it's close to being like right but not quite. So it can be a fragile trust at times.
Okay, so since trust is really important in any field, but especially in AI, with just the overwhelm that it is creating among a lot of people's thoughts and perceptions these days, how do companies develop that trust? I mean, it seems to me this is something you've gotten good at doing for yourself and for others. So what are some ways beyond just being trustworthy over time that they can help facilitate this trust?
Yeah, there's a lot of different ways, and I think at different phases of when you are developing an AI system, that might look a little different as to what you focus on to build trust. But I will say fundamentally, and what I always try to get people to start at, is understanding what I call the ground truth. What is really happening in the lives of your users? What are the real challenges and problems that they are facing? And making sure that you are not doing what is very tempting to do, which is to say, we have this great new technology, we're going to use it. Let's find all the different ways we can plug it into things and have it do work you would normally do. But we might skip the human reality of like, whoa, this is really maybe disruptive to my workflow, or I don't feel confident in my ability to use the tool. I don't know what outcomes we're striving for, and it creates a lot of friction, or this could take my job, which is another very real sentiment that people feel. And so whether you're designing this as something your internal staff are using or external, just talking to people builds trust and demonstrating that you are listening. So asking, you said this yourself, asking open-ended questions, it's good regardless of who your user base is, and reflecting back what you heard, and then actually taking action on it. So one of the things in this workshop I was telling you about, where we do anticipatory design, is we ideate about all the possible risks, but then we actually document them and plug them into technical architectures, or other kind of roadmaps and plans. So it's not just that we performatively perform this exercise of listening and empathize with people, but we made it a tangible output and an actionable insight that we can build into what we're doing. So to me, that's just foundational, no matter where you are, what you're doing in AI.
Right. So you want to ask your users or potential users, and do it in a way that is sincere, and then actually listen and take action on the information they provide you. And
Yeah.
Okay.
I think you summarized that right. And then what I was saying about it can look different in different phases, you alluded to, trust is something built over time as well. It's not a switch you flip on and off. So, you have to create good outputs or good experiences each and every time to the greatest extent, you can. So that means after having talked to users, we built the system in a way we think is good. We know what outcomes we're trying to deliver for our users and for the business. Are we tracking to those things? And when something goes off the rails, are we able to pick up on that and do something about it Do users have a way to, maybe if they think an algorithm's made an unfair decision, can they flag that and get some kind of appeal, process going, so that trust, it's carried through once you deliver it, and as issues happen, you're demonstrating that care throughout. So I think that's also important.
Right. And one thing I've noticed is a lot of communication now is being done with AI-driven chatbots,
Mm.
and it would really be helpful, at least for people with disabilities, if there was a way to make sure that whoever is responding to those concerns of somebody with a disability has access to the opportunity to go outside the chat box to somebody who actually knows the technology or the experiences of the person trying to communicate that problem.
Yeah, yeah, that's such a good point. And they call, in some cases they call this maybe human in the loop, if you will. But I think the one of the things that I try also to get clients to think about is not only kind of the risk profile of the technology, but also the use cases themselves. That's where talking to people about their daily lives and their daily challenges really comes into play. And not every use case is equally maybe urgent or risky, but certainly for higher stakes things, like if I'm trying to navigate a site because I am trying to apply for a business loan or something like that. I mean, yeah, you want to talk to a person who understands your situation if things go the wrong way. And so I think just being mindful of the perceived risk that the users are facing and how that could be amplified if you have an accessibility need, I think does make a lot of difference.
I'm really impressed that you said that the user experiences, these exchanges, can inform the business owner, because I feel like that if you believe that, then your clients are going to believe that, and they're going to value the exchanges people like me have with those chat boxes, and they're going to listen to those exchanges in the more risk-based experiences and take advantage of that information to make themselves even better.
Oh, yeah, I love that. And what I try to, because I can be a bummer if I'm the person saying, oh, this is risky, that's risky. It's not about that. It's about understanding what could go wrong and exercising care, because we don't want bad things to happen. So we flip that around to the positive. We say we are going to build in safeguards so that we are protecting people. And not only that, that's a huge advantage for us. So if we can talk about that and make that known to our customers, to our users, I think this all serves to make our organizations more resilient, more trustworthy. So there's tons of benefit to, casting a wide net and thinking proactively about our entire user base and all the variability within it.
Right. Instead of thinking of customer requests or complaints as complaints, thinking of them as opportunities to communicate with your users and to create an even better product that will generate more loyalty and long-term sustainability.
Yeah, I really love how you summarize that. That's exactly right. And don't
Well,
just design for that happy path, because we're not all on the happy path.
my social media feed's any indication, but a lot of people aren't on the happy path.
I can
Uh,
understand. Yeah.
But then you went on to one other thing that is really important, and that is communication. And I feel like there's two areas of this. It sounds to me like you've covered communication. Making sure these businesses are monitoring these exchanges and benefiting from them. But one thing that puzzles me, and this is specifically about accessibility, but in your experience, it may apply more generally as well, is the reluctance of businesses to communicate their process or progress through their outgoing content, like their blog posts, social media content, or email list. Because me personally, if I know that a company is making the effort to improve accessibility, I'm far more likely to give them the benefit of the doubt and to stay with them as they address the needs that I or other people like me may have. So I just find it interesting that businesses are reluctant to share their progress and use it as a way of building loyalty.
It's interesting. Yeah, I'd have to think about that a bit. I wonder if it has anything to do in some cases with the regulatory or legal scrutiny that they fear they might be under if they're admitting some kind of imperfection in that area or striving toward better. I don't know, but I wonder if that's the piece of it. But I agree that as long as it's good faith effort, like not just a, hey, we're going to say that we're doing it, but we're not. As long as it's good faith, I think there's opportunity there. You're right.
Right. Well, my good friend Alex Sanfilippo, who's the person behind Podmatch.com, when he came on my podcast, he discussed how when he started sharing that he was working on accessibility, that many people in the SaaS community, which is software as a service for those of y'all who don't know, were very critical, negative, and were pushing for him to abandon his desire to improve accessibility so his platform would be available to people of all abilities. So I wonder if the fear of negative response from your colleagues could be in there as well.
Yeah, you had shared something like that with me previously, and that just really shocked me because those of us who kind of know the guts, and I'm not an engineer, I will say, but I manage engineers and I sat with them and I feel like I understood, at least from the web perspective, a lot of how, things are built, that when we design for accessibility, sounds cliche, but we are designing, for everybody. And
yes.
It's just
play the applause music. Yes.
But it's legitimately true. I mean, all I can think of are cliches, which is why it's surprising that it's not more common knowledge. But even physically, I remember, having kids and really appreciating, people talk about curb cutouts, or you talk about good structured HTML content. It's easier for everyone to navigate, to read, for machines to read. And that's great for search engine optimization. So there's lots of benefit. And it strikes me that investing just a little bit of effort, and it really doesn't have to be tremendous effort, just a mindfulness about it pays a lot of dividends. So I'm shocked. I'm sad to hear that, but I guess that's a challenge.
It surprised me too. And he's actually been talking more about that lately. But, you talked about it earlier. Big tech has a totally different viewpoint of how things should be. And a lot of entrepreneurs and aspiring business owners, they model their behavior on what the big tech is doing and saying. So I'm sure that plays into some of the fear and reluctance around embracing accessibility. Hopefully AI is going to eventually start improving accessibility, because we're still at a very paltry less than 5% of the web being accessible.
Wow. Yeah, it's the same as, years ago when I was in higher ed. So the potential, you're right, is there. I will share, if you don't mind, a little anecdote. My website is vibe coded. I use Firebase Studio. That's a Google product to create that site. And it's really allowed me to do things that, outside of basic HTML and CSS, I wouldn't have been able to do. So it can, make some forms and things of that nature. But what I noticed is I put in my prompts. I'm like, this needs to be accessible. And, that was always a core part of how I had prompted it. But regardless, it would put out like text, for example, just very basic stuff, color contrast, not sufficient. Right. I can tell that just with my eyes looking at it. I don't even need to run it through a checker. But, Google does have built into that tool, a tool called Lighthouse, and you can run it and it'll do an accessibility check. Sometimes it'll tell you, that, the contrast is low, needs to be fixed, and then I can prompt it to do it. Other times it'll say you need to check this, and it might be like reading order or something like that. But the tool's there. It's just, do you have the recognition and the motivation or the empathy to click on it and do it? And it's unfortunate it's not easier to do by default, but I am hopeful that capacity exists and will be leveraged in the future.
It's sad, but in a lot of cases, the creating options where the default forces users to think about or implement accessibility is really what it takes. For example, on most social media platforms now, you can press a button to add the alt text, but most of them are not going to put a thing up that says, "Hey, you didn't add the alt text. Are you sure you want to do this without the alt text?"
Yeah.
We don't have that in many cases. Plus, for at least for alt text, it's challenging to most entrepreneurs because they have to post that alt text on every image on every social media platform they're on. So, and who knows, maybe that's one of the things that AI will eventually help people with, as far as, some of those little things that go into the bigger thing. But it is good to know that with well-meaning people like yourself and your clients, that AI can, and hopefully someday soon, will be able to generate more accessible, or help the people using it to create more accessible content.
Yeah, the potential's certainly there. The maybe muscle memory of how to do that with these new tools is not quite there yet. But I would advise anyone who's, maybe you're trying out building an app, like I was talking about vibe coding. The tools, I use Claude a lot. You can put code in and ask it questions about accessibility, or is this markup sufficient? What else do I need to do? And what questions could I ask of someone who might know to really evaluate this site? So leverage the tools to get it there. It's a little clunky. It's not as built in, which would be ideal, but it's certainly possible.
Right. So before we end, I want to make sure I give you a little time to tell us about the workshop, what it's called, and how long it lasts, and what the goals are for people who want to take advantage of it.
Yeah, I offer a few different services at Saddle Stitch Consulting. So I offer workshops, and I also offer embedded service strategy services. So where I work, directly with teams who are building or deploying AI to do, as we talked about, really anticipate and mitigate issues, be the accessibility, security, explainability issues, all of those kinds of user experiences we want to anticipate. So that's one piece of my service. But in terms of workshops, I'm happy to educate people about responsible AI, how to leverage it responsibly, accessibly, and also work on governance and
Are you still there?
Heading level 5. Skip to content button. Item choose 5 items. Jill Heinze accessibilities with Jill Heinze. Remove Jill Heinze from mute Jill Heinze's mic. Remove Jill Heinze from stage. Add Jill Heinze to stage. Remove.
You still there? Yeah. Well, it could be the weather.
Could be. We've got a lot of ice out here in Central Virginia, which is odd. But as I was saying, I have workshops, I have services where I'm more embedded with delivery teams, and I work on governance AI topics.
Okay, well, let's hold up a minute, and we'll take one more try at you telling people how they can work with you. But just while I'm waiting on her, it is Saddle Stitch Consulting, and I'm pretty sure the website is saddlestitchconsulting.com. You can find Jill Heinze on LinkedIn under her name, which is Heinze. So are you back now?
I think I'm back.
There you go.
Yes.
There you go. Yeah,
well, thank you for that.
Finish telling them all the good stuff you can do for them. So.
Yeah, well, I offer a couple of different services. I offer workshops, as you were alluding to. Those are and additionally, I have services where I'm embedded with your delivery teams or those who are applying AI to help make sure we do it in a responsible way. So you can find all that stuff on the services section of my website. And I do 30-minute consultations for free. So if you just want to chat, I'm happy to do it.
Well, you obviously you can't do better than free. And and one thing I've learned from doing this podcast is by having those conversations before I sit down to record with a guest, I feel like we have better conversations. And if nothing else, you get to see the other person's face and hear their voice. And as we both know, that goes a long ways towards creating the kind of trust and determining whether or not you would be comfortable working with something especially on something as important to you as the future success of your business.
Yeah, thank you so much, Max, for the opportunity. This has been a lot of fun.
Well, I'm glad you enjoyed it. I hope that our audience has learned something from this, and I really do appreciate the work you're doing to encourage more ethical uses of AI to focus on the user experience, and that includes all users, even those who have physical, mental, or emotional disabilities. You are setting an important standard. You are definitely, in my opinion, a thought leader in this area, because we really need more people with your voice in the area of AI. Because as you mentioned, it can be a very powerful tool that can improve the lives of everyone who has interactions online, but it can also be very frustrating and destructive if not applied correctly.
Yeah, well, I appreciate that. And I appreciate the work that you're doing as well, Max. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much. I appreciate you coming on the podcast. And as y'all know, her name is Jill Heinze. You can find her at saddlestitchconsulting.com. Is it consulting or coaching? Did I get it wrong the last time?
No, you're perfect. Consulting.
Okay, I'm good. All right. And I am the blind blogger, Maxwell Ivy. This is another episode of The Accessibility Advantage, which you can find at theaccessibilityadvantage.com. On LinkedIn, I'm under Maxwell Ivy, which is IVEY. If you are looking for someone to educate your organization on accessibility, or help y'all take steps to improve accessibility across your online platform, then please do reach out. Use the email or the booking link so that we can have a conversation and see where that would take us. I want to thank everybody who has joined us today. I know that you have a lot of demands on your time. You have very little spare time to spend. I appreciate you spending it with me. I also want to make sure I thank our sponsor, Blueberry.com. That's Blueberry without the E's. They provide free hosting to this podcast and to several other podcasts hosted by people with disabilities. And so please, if you have a podcast or you're wanting to start one, you need some hosting, do please check into Blueberry.com. Until next time, y'all take care of yourselves out there. Disabled people, we tell our friends and share to our social sites. Don't think about how hard it is. Just focus on those dollar signs. 'Cause accessibility ain't just for those with disabilities.
Item chooser menu. 1 2 items, end stream button. End stream. End the stream. And outro set not end stream button.